I'm actually do two demonstrations today. One because I'm very quick, and in an hour and a half I can get two paintings done. And I want to do one on white paper and then one on black Stonehenge black paper, which is right. Oh, wrong. This is the Stonehenge black and the Stonehenge white. And I'm going to be using 300 pound on both of them because these papers come in both 300 pound, 140. The black. Here you can see actually this will be the white, and then we have the also on the black. And so we have two paintings ready to go. And so let's go right over to our, and we're also going to be using Holbein Gouache. I represent Holbein and Legion papers. I work on them both because I love them. And it's a great paints and paper. And so let me just go to my tabletop here real quick. And actually, let me just show you what we're going to be painting first. This is what we're going to be painting. We're going to be doing kind of an evening shot of an alley. We're going to make an alley look good. And we're also going to do a European like cafe scene and kind of at twilight where it's almost the sun is down. I usually like to do things that are kind of moody. And so we're going to try to make them moody. And we'll do it all in gouache, but we're going to do it a little bit like, and here's my tabletop. And so we're going to, and again, if you have questions at any time, just ask Pamela and she'll ask me, and you can interrupt me at any time. But I just keep on talking. I'll keep on going because I only have an hour and a half to do these two. So I will be working really fast. And as you can see up here too, I also have an airbrush. I have this mister that is really neat nowadays for you watercolorists and gouache painters. And again, this is gouache, and I have gouache in this palette that I can cover, and I can put a little, it has a little bit, this is a Jack Richardson, what do you call it? Lockbox palette. And you can just put this right over it. And there's little sponges you can keep wet so it keeps moist. And okay, let's get going here. And so, and then first I'm going to start with the white paper, only because when there's a time where I have to let things dry, and I'm going to work gouache like gouache and like watercolor, because gouache really is watercolor. And the old gouache that people are really accustomed to, the old gouache, and they don't want to go back into it because the old gouache was really white and had a lot of tint in it of basically a lot of white. And so Holbein doesn't mix white with their gouache to make it gouache. It's opaque because of the amount of pigment they use in it. And also the formula that they use in there. I better put my drink over here. Sorry about that. Almost reached right into my water container. So I'm going to start out with the cafe scene. And what I'm going to do is use it like watercolor. And so I'm going to do my first washes. I do it, this is kind of neat because you can also do this in acrylics. So if you ever want to do, if you're an acrylic painter, and they actually have acrylic gouache too, acrylic gouache, I think they call it, but I think actually they got rid of that name, but it's Holbein also makes a gouache acrylic, which is, if you're an acrylic painter, that's my favorite, acrylics. And I also use that. I also use all this stuff together. Like if you want to use the gouache together with the watercolor with the acrylics, it's all good, boy. It's all really nice. And so I'm going to go in here, wet my sky. My sky is my lightest. And with watercolor, you usually go light to dark. And I know I talk pretty fast. I've got that. I come from Chicago, 50 miles north of Chicago. So we could talk kind of fast. So I'm going to see if I can slow down once in a while because I'll be talking nonstop here, guys. And I'm going to start out with a yellow. The sky in the picture, as you see up here, is blue, but there's going to be no blue in the rest of the part of the painting so much. So I want to make that yellow too. So I'm going to start out with the yellow sky. I usually like to mix my white with, and this again is all gouache. This is not watercolor. And even when I do the black paper, it's all going to be the gouache. But you can do the same thing with watercolor. I've used watercolor on this paper. I've used gouache on the paper. I've used acrylic on the paper. It's all good. So make that a little yellow. And as I go down here, I'm going to go and make every other part that's light yellow. I'm going to put that right away into the painting. Here's some light. It's lit up right around this area. Go light to dark. And I'm going to keep some parts of, I mean, I could mask off the top of this if you wanted to be really tight person. I'm not really super tight when it comes to my watercolors. They're a little bit more impressionistic than like the hyperrealism that's going on right nowadays. I just went to the one show, and boy, there's a lot of hyperrealism in there, which is really cool. But I don't have the patience for that. But you do the same thing though. You do light to dark, and just go light first, Go your dark. So here's some yellows in here, yellow and orange. These colors I don't know the exact names of because I know some of the colors of the watercolor, but these are kind of different names to them. And so I am using the, let me show you real quickly. I'm using 4 different sets. They have 4 different sets right now. They have this is the winter, summer, spring, and fall. And so I had a mixture of all, kind of like a lot of them. And as you can see, each one has a little bit different colors in it for that season. You can buy them like this in a separate. I see that Pamela put up there what I'm using. And the spring and summer. I did take a few out of the winter fall, only because I wanted to have a couple of those colors that are my favorites and stuff. So they're all good. They're really wonderful sets. Just get the whole season. It's always fun. They even have silver in here. I took silver out of the one. I think silver gray. That's silver gray, but the other one they actually have silver, like it's almost like a metal flake looking thing. So that's really great to use on the black nickel black paper. Any questions? Please ask. You can ask away, and Pamela will ask me. And like I said,
there's a question that popped up. It's about a material that's not on your list, but maybe you know about it. Are you familiar about Winsor Newton blending medium? It's also known as a pharmaceutical grade propylene glycol to slow down drying time. It's somebody by the name of Lena Revo has recommended it. I'm assuming that's a watercolor
Is that for
artist.
acrylic? Is that for acrylic? Because
I believe it's for watercolor. Well, Harry? Oh, it's for gouache.
it's for gouache? Oh, okay. It just makes it dry slower? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. And usually because I'm working really wet, I really don't ever have to worry about that because I'm working pretty wet. And I guess when you're outside, maybe that's a really good thing to do is probably when you're outside and you have to keep things and the sun's really hot, maybe that's when you use that. I've never actually heard of that.
Oh yeah, there's a comment that Lena does do a lot of plein air painting. So perhaps that is why she uses it in her practice.
Yeah, I got a feeling is if you want it to dry, because inside, like this is going to take forever to dry, and that's like I'm going to do too. While this one's drying, I'll get onto the first wash on the other one, so it's a little bit easier to do it that way. And so I'm just kind of wetting it. And my watercolors also, and my gouache, I always use it first like a watercolor because I get thicker and thicker as I go along. And I'm more of a watercolorist than anything, but I use all these things together. And my watercolor techniques work really well with the gouache. And then when I get to the gouache part end of it, where it's really thick, or I make it thick, then that's cool too. You know, so it's all good. But my watercolor, when I do my watercolor, I use a lot of wet in the wet, so it doesn't dry very fast at all. But like you said, if you're in the sun, yes, it will dry. And I've actually done some plein air up in Minnesota, and yes, it does dry, especially if you're in the sun, pretty close, or it's really warm and not humid, and it's very. All right, and so here I'm just getting my darks in here now, my middle tones. I first do my lights, which I got in there. I have a little speck right there, I noticed, so I'm going to take that and my sky that I ripped out my brush from last night. Okay, so we're just going to go through here, wetting it. The great thing about the gouache that I really love is the fact that you can go thick, you know, and you can go opaque, and that's all cool, you know, that you can do that. So you have so much more time, and you can, if you make a mistake or anything, you just go right back in, re-wet it. And then you can cover things up too. You know, a lot of times with watercolor, you're not supposed to cover things up, but I tend to use my watercolors now, kind of like gouache. I don't mind using white with my watercolors because I feel it's like, it's okay to do that. I was always taught in schools always to never use white with my watercolors, but you know, with the I saw a show by Andrew Wyeth and he used black, and I saw a show by Sargent and he had white in it too. So I'm thinking if those guys can use those colors in their masters, then I can use that too. So then I started using those things in there. I'm getting kind of violet here. I tend to go really violet when I'm using gouache, only because there's a couple colors in here I really love. I'm going to try to gray them down a little bit so they're not so vibrant. And again, this is all wet, so I'm getting all soft edging. So that's one thing I like about gouache and using it like watercolor, because you can get blending. That's okay. I'll show you how to wipe out afterwards. So when something's wet and go over it. The nice thing when you're using a watercolor technique with gouache, you can get soft edges. They happen on their own. You don't have to blend anything. You just add water. Let the water float, and then float your pigment into the water. And that's how if you use enough of it, and you can use it thick, like that's because you can use it really nice and thick, and you can learn how to use your watercolor. If you're a watercolor artist, you can learn to use your watercolors better because you're using thicker. And most watercolors don't use enough paint. They tint more than they work a big gouache. And so by using gouache, it taught me a lot about using more pigment and not being chintzy and skimping on the amount of paint you got to use. Because then you get to see all that beautiful granulation happening when you have a lot of paint in your brush. And that's sort of what gouache has given me. And also acrylics. I do the same thing with acrylics. Kind of leaving this watermark here because it's kind of, oh no, I got rid of it. So I can wipe out. I can blend this away. And also another thing that's really great is these misters. These misters they have now. It's a pump mister, and you pump it, and then it just comes out for a little bit, and it becomes a really fine mist. So if something gets to be where it's not wet enough, but a lot of times when you go with a brush, it makes too much water on there. But just a little mist over there will keep it wet and floating your pigment. So that's a really cool thing you gotta keep in mind. All right, so now I got pretty much all my mediums and lights. And so I'm gonna go down here, get the medium and lights around the bottom, and then we're gonna let that dry, and we're gonna start on our black paper just to show you. And then we'll do our darks on here after it dries. So I always do lights, middle tone, and then darks. I kind of go in 3 stages with my paintings. And so here we're gonna do now the floor. And most of this stuff is dark. All these people are kind of getting dark here. So I'm gonna kind of go in there. Just put a medium wash over that and make it radiate of the light that's in the area. So behind them is light, and they're gonna be darker. So why not just go through them? And then you can put your gouache over that. Later on too, I have an airbrush up here. You can see I'm gonna use an airbrush to get some soft edges. You can do that also. This is an airbrush where the compressor is in, it's a makeup airbrush, and you can then just start it up and you can put in like really light things for those people who do really fine hyperrealism. You can use an airbrush to keep it really smooth. You can do that too. I'll show you how to do that later. It's really nice on black because on black, then I can use it for like putting out little lights in the thing. And also here too, I can put little dots in there to make it light up. Keeping this a little warm around where the light areas are. And of course, these people are all in a little light area here and a nice warm area. So I'm gonna put nice yellows and such in this area. And then this whole foreground will be a little bit darker. I don't do much mixing of the paints. I kind of let the mix on the paper more than on the palette here, because I like the things to flow together, and I can mix in the water of the paper. You know, it's wet, and so I can keep that all nice and soft edged. I can use thick paint, and it'll only bleed so far, so I can get a soft edge, and I'll only stay in that area the more pigment I use. And again, by using gouache, it teaches you to use enough things. You don't have to worry about getting too thick. You almost want it thick is what you want to do. All right, so I'm going to put that aside now for a little bit, and we're going to go into our black paper. If you get any questions, just let me know. I like answering questions.
All right, so you're working on Stonehenge paper today.
Yep.
And the weight of the paper currently, which is a white Legion Stonehenge paper, are you using the 300 pound?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the 300 pound only because it doesn't wrinkle when I'm really wet like this. So when I work really wet, if you don't work with this wet, then you don't have to use one, you can use 140, but I don't want the wrinkles, and so unless you spray the back and the front, and then it's gonna be wet for a little bit, but yeah, I usually use the 300 pound. And the black also, and it's also cold press. It's not hot press, it's cold press. And then for the black, it'll be the same thing. The black paper is also the 300 pound black, Stonehenge Aqua black. That's cold press also. The brushes I'm using are my brushes. You can get them on my website. They're Holbein Golds. I have 6 of them that are, they're not on this one. I was using this one yesterday in my videotaping. But I have these 6 right here, and those are the ones you can get as a set or individually, but they're beautiful brushes. There's synthetic nylon brushes. All right, so I'm gonna put this aside just for a second, and we'll switch over to the black paper. And so here's the black paper. And for the black paper, I put the drawing down with a charcoal pencil, a general pencil. I think it's a not white, yeah, white pastel pencil, I think it's by General Pencil. And it works really well on the black paper. And I put down, let me show you the picture. 1 second here. So there's the picture up in the left-hand corner. And so I chose one, and I kind of manipulated the image a little bit by putting in the sky. The sky was black, and I just felt like it needed a little bit more color in the sky because it was just a pitch black sky in there. So I just, with my Photoshop, I went in there and just did a little bit of arranging of putting some other colors in there. It was also very warm, and I want to get some cool colors in there too, especially in the background around where the lights are. That's going to be really cool. Now, one thing about this is that you work totally opposite. So on this one, you work from dark to light with the watercolor type, and gouache with when you're doing like a watercolor, you work light to dark. And about here, I get the big areas done of the dark. So if these darks have a certain color, I'm just going to put a tint over them. And I do, again, like a watercolorist, I'm going to put a lot of water on it. So I just want to tint the surface. And again, the Holbein, the paper, for one, it's just like watercolor paper, the black. It's identical to the white, just that it's black. And for a lot of watercolorists and even gouache people, they don't like using white. But I guess the gouache people do, because it was kind of like, that's what it is. It's a white thing. But again, Holbein does not put white in their gouache to turn it opaque. They just use more pigment and filler than white. That's like people stopped using them because they were so pastel-like. But look at these colors. Some of these colors are just like the watercolors, and they're just very, very beautiful. And so if I want to take like a blue, let's say I want to take a blue and just take some of the black and make it look a little blue, I just put a little bit over that, right over the top, and a wet wash. And I'm sure can't see anything that's happening because it's just a really light. Here, I put a little bit more blue in there, light blue, you'll see. And the thing about the black paper is that it dries 20% darker. Actually, maybe even like 30% darker, because it sucks into the paper. And then you get like this looks really blue now, but watch when it dries, it'll be black again, just with a tint of blue in there. And the background sky that's a little bit lighter. So first, again, I want to put in some areas. And with the gouache, you don't have to use white in here as much as you do like watercolor. So I'm just putting it in because it is thicker and it covers better than watercolor when you're using it on black paper. And so I'm just going to put a little bit of that in there. I'm just kind of putting in the warm colors and the big areas that are going to be darker. The black stays black. I mean, parts of it. And so when you're using the black paper, you don't want to do a really super shiny scene, something that's like sunlight, really bright sunlight. You want to take it down a little bit, like in the evening, or a picture that has a lot of darks in it. Because why do it if it's got a lot of lights? Then you're gonna have to cover up all your black. And same thing with white paper. Use it for really bright colors, and really bright areas, so that you leave a lot of white of the paper. So you can have both of these papers in your arsenal. So if you're doing a really dark painting, you use the black. If you're doing a really light painting, use the white. That doesn't mean you can also use the black paper to do a really light scene, and you can do the same thing with the white paper. I just think it's, what's really cool, that the fact that you have 2 different ones now. And they're basically the only ones that have a highly quality black paper. There's a couple other black papers out there that are not watercolor paper. They're not sized. This is sized throughout, inside and the surface, and it's 100% cotton. A lot of these other black papers, I think there's only one other watercolor, or not watercolor, but yeah, watercolor paper that's black. And they're not, I've tried it, it's not that great. I forgot the name of it. I'm putting a little bit of warmth in there because I got to remember that this is going to dry a lot darker than this looks. It looks really red that I just put there. Watch when this is dry. It dries pretty quickly too. And so I'm going in here. And it's kind of neat. I think it's easier to actually work on black paper because you turn on the light switch. You turn the light switch on and you just put in all the lights. So right now it's dark, right? And so as soon as I put the lights in, it suddenly becomes really bright. And so that's pretty cool. I'm going to take a little bit of white and a little bit of this blue, light blue. It's a little grayer. And so I'm not going to make it as yellow as the photograph. I'm going to make it a little bit less than that. I'm going to make it warm and cool. I want a little bit of both in there. So I'm going to go in here with a little bit of the gray. I can also throw a little bit of warmth in there, like it's like a wash. And it's kind of neat because you just basically turn on a switch and you're basically making it, oops, right there, I didn't. I basically put on a switch and then I just go in there and put the lights where the lights need to be. Now, the thing is with this pastel pencil, if I go over it, the line disappears, but hopefully by that time you already have what you want. So for the sky, I'm going to go and make that a little bit not as light as the picture. I'm just going to go in here. It looks really light right there, but watch how, again, watch how dark it gets. And that's one of those things that with white paper, it always gets lighter because it's white. But here it really emphasizes it a lot because the black takes over. The black takes over the color that you have in there, and you think you got it, but then you're like, wow, that got really dark. But a lot of people who have started using the black paper for watercolor or for gouache, acrylic or watercolor gouache, they love it. They absolutely love it. It's a kind of neat thing because it goes pretty fast too. Like I'll have these both done, and I actually watched the clock too. So again, an hour and a half. And the reason I'm so fast with painting is because I used to work as a storyboard illustrator for TV storyboards. And we had a lot of big clients. And we would have to get the thing done, the storyboards done in a certain time. And so if you had to get them done in a certain time, I always made sure you get them done. So I'm very good at scheduling how long I got to do something. And the drawing I just did from, I'm a very skilled drawer because of working 25 years as a storyboard illustrator. Everything you draw comes from your imagination. You don't, I mean, I work with art directors who give me assignments and they have to draw stuff. So I have to make all those things up. So for doing stuff like this, it's kind of simple because I've got a picture in front of me and I could have made it up on my own. And so I just look and I can quickly go, and if there's something wrong with the picture, I can easily make it my own. I'm actually going to make the sun right here. I'm going to make it really bright right there. I'm going to take a little white. I'm just going to make it really light right here. Like the sun is almost going down. And I probably should make it yellow though, shouldn't I? Okay. Oh well. I'm just going to make a light daytime then. A little bit lighter down there. Or should I make it over here? As you notice too, I don't copy to a T. I don't take the photograph, which is fine, you know, for those hyper realists. But I tend to try to make things different from what the photograph is. And because I'm doing a shorthand, you know, I'm not doing exactly what there's. I'm interpreting what I see there. And I try to get as much in there to just enough so that you know what it is. And it's enough to just basically show you what it is. I don't have to explain everything out of the painting. I'm not that kind of painter. I just can't spend that much time.
So David, there's like a small request here. If you're able to brighten your exposure while you're working on the white, on the black paper.
On the black. Let's see, I can do it a little bit lighter, but it'll bleach out, I think. Oh, hold on.
Oh,
Let me see if I can get a little bit brighter. Probably as bright as I can get it without bleaching out all the other colors. Hold on. One more. As bright as I can get it. Hopefully that's good enough.
okay, thanks.
It is kind of dark because it's a dark paper. I haven't got to the light parts yet either. So
All
once I
right.
get to the lighter parts, it will be bright. It'll be a lot brighter.
Okay, I have a question here for you.
Mhm.
Do you pour your paint water down the drain? I'm getting more concerned about water disposal for my acrylic and gouache water. Someone suggested leaving it to dry out, but that seems impossible. Where do you store all that dirty water? Environmental question.
Yeah. Since it is pigment, it's just basically dirt, right? It's kind of like dirt poured into into the ground, into the dirt, because it bring it back to its originality. Well, isn't pigment, a lot of it is dirt, right? I always say it's colored dirt. The acrylics, a lot of people, what they do is they take a bucket with sand and they put a hole in the bottom and they pour it into the like a 5-gallon bucket. I've seen this, a couple of art places do this where they take the 5-gallon bucket, put sand in it and just pour your paint into that and put holes in the bottom where the filtered water will just come out, leaking out as water. And then the acrylic and the gouache pigment stays in the sand.
Thank you. Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit of research for the disposing of paper or paint, but I want everyone to know that Opus, you can bring your empty paint tubes there now and we'll recycle them for you. So if you have an empty oil tube or acrylic tube, and just bring them to the store and we'll make sure they get recycled for you.
That's a nice service.
Yeah, we're trying to do our best. The environment.
You see, I'm getting lighter and lighter as we go along, and it just go from dark to light. So you basically put the darkest parts in first, and you just keep on getting lighter and lighter. And then when you do your lights, you just always got to remember when you're doing it on black paper that it does dry about 20% darker. So you really got to use enough paint. It seems like you're using too much at first, but it isn't. You'll notice that. Look at how dark things are getting. And this stayed pretty light because I did a little bit lighter than I wanted it, but that's okay. And then I go in with a little bit thicker paint, thicker and thicker as you go along too. The lighter I get, the thicker my paint gets too, because I want it to stay there. I want it to stay a little bit more opaque. And then I get to a point where it is super opaque and where it's thick. And then I can use that pure white. I can just go in like an oil painting. And for those gouache painters, they can do it just like the oils. You can actually paint it like oils, that thick. And it doesn't crack. You know, some people worry that it's going to crack because it's like watercolor will crack, but it doesn't crack. Blue in this corner. This garage door in here is kind of nice dark blue. So I'll take my ultramarine blue and a little bit of this other blue and I'll just go right in here and just put a little blue in there. And it looks really bright. Again, everything looks bright, right? But I always have to, probably the hardest thing for my students to understand is that with white watercolor, when you're doing gouache, when you're doing this thin, it's gonna get darker on black paper, a lot darker. And so the thicker you make it, of course, it's not as bad. but I kind of like the soft edging that I get at first. So I would like to go soft and thin first before I start putting really thick stuff in there. If you put too thick right away, then it gets too bottled up and it gets too thick, and then it gets a kind of a weird look. I like to have it soft edged first and get that all out of the way. I know this is really blue right there, but that's okay because I also want to up the emphasis on some of these colors that I have in there. And if you mess up some of the black, you can also rub it out or put black over it again too, which is kind of neat. I mean, people don't realize, like, you can just put black over black and then I'll just make it back to where it started with. And now I'm gonna work from the back to the front here. I'm gonna get that background kind of in there. And like, there wasn't as many big areas to do on this one as it was on the other one, the other painting, the white paper. So that's like I'm going a little bit slower here because I'm kind of just getting the big darks, and there's not as much wash in them as like the black, as the white paper. And now I'm going to go with some pure white with yellow to start putting the lights on, really get the lights going here. And it's really weird for some artists to use white, and not for oil painters and not for gouache painters, but for watercolorists, they just don't want to use white because they've been taught never to use white. And so for them to switch and put the gouache, if you're a watercolorist and you start using gouache, you're just like, oh, I don't want to use white because you're not supposed to use white, or you mix your blacks. I don't do that. I don't mix my blacks, and I don't, and I do use white. And if I want my blacks to look colorful, I put color into those black areas. And it's just as fun with this paper, it's the same thing, you know, because you're putting the white in because there is no white in the paper. So I have to put white in there. Otherwise I'm stuck. There's nothing I can do if I don't put white, use white. So I'm going to bring this down in here. I'm turning on the light switch again. Like I was told you before, you're turning on the light switch. So you need to turn the light switch with some light colors, and they get thicker. Like I said, it gets thicker also. So that stays that value.
So David, I noticed you're wearing a glove right now while you're painting, and there's just a question about like safety in the chat here, where
I just put it on because I was actually doing some waxing of a watercolor before, and so I wax my watercolors and my gouache now paintings. I wax them with cold wax, Dorland cold wax, and I just happen to have that on. I forgot to take it off. But actually, it's nice to keep my hand clean because I use it a lot where I'm rubbing and stuff. And so I find it, I get so used to having a glove on that I kind of put it on a lot now.
Yeah. And sometimes there will be, for everyone out there, sometimes there will be warnings on tubes with paints. It really depends on what pigment is being used. For example, like cadmiums and cobalts, they're not necessarily the safest to be like rubbing over your skin or eating. You just don't want to do that, really. Don't ever do that. So it's always good, you know, to consider these things and to try to practice safely. So if you're concerned, you can always wear gloves. There's also barrier creams out there that can protect your hands and the pigments from absorbing in.
Yeah, the gouaches, they have the AP coat on that. They're the Holbein Gouache. I know they're really into their gouache, or Holbein's really into making sure that they have non-toxic products, and so they're all AP, the AP coating on them. I think a lot of them have it.
It's good.
Now I'm just getting lighter. See how that's like lighting up? It's lighting up little by little. It's getting lighter and lighter.
Okay, I have another question here for you. Is there a gray or tan color that you can recommend for paper out there to paint on?
I'm sorry, say that again. Is there a tan paper?
Yeah, like, do you have a recommendation for a gray or tan paper for painting on too? Perry's been kind of excited about how these tone papers look with gouache.
Yeah, I don't know if you could maybe take a white paper and turn it into gray, like a first wash, but I don't know of any, I just know the black and white. I'm not sure if there's a company out there that does like some of the some of the colors like of the papers. For watercolor paper, I'm not sure, because this is definitely watercolor paper that I'm using, because it is 100% cotton. So I'm not sure if they make an acid, or not acid, a sized paper, watercolor paper that is another color. And
Yeah, I think in Opus, like we have the Saint Armand mixed media pad. It's not, it doesn't have as much sizing as a regular watercolor paper does
yeah, I
though.
think that's
So
that's the only thing about it. If I'm using like a gouache, like a watercolor, then I definitely want to have it sized really well. I know there's a bunch of black papers that are for wet water media, but they're not sized. So if you're using a thick right away and you're not using it wet and stuff, then I guess go ahead and it's fine, because you can just basically, doesn't matter for that. But if you're going to use like a watercolor, you really kind of need to have that sizing so that it acts well.
yeah.
So it gives you the. I'm leaving some of these spots available for my airbrush so that later on I can go in there and I can just airbrush the little light areas in there. And before I do that, I'm just going to get in here and get some really nice washes again. Hurry up a little bit so I can make sure I get both of them done.
Loving witnessing these brights showing up on the black paper, David.
Yeah, it just all of a sudden comes to life. That's one nice thing about the black paper. All of a sudden, little by little, things come to life. Because it's basically nighttime, and all of a sudden you turn the light switch on, and it's like, oh, I can see that now.
I like that. So another question for you. If you leave gouache in the wells and the gouache dries overnight, can you reactivate it with water? If yes, will the gouache crack and crumble like some other traditional gouaches?
No. Not like another thing is like with the watercolor and the gouache of Holbein, there's certain items they don't put in because they're really look out for that. And like with the watercolors, you can put them in because they don't have oxcal in them, and so they never dry out to a hard rock like that. The Holbein watercolors. With this, I've had these out, and they're more like, I'm gonna say like rubbery. they dry rubbery. It's kind of weird. Yeah, it's not like the old, it's definitely not like the old things that some people are used to, because they just don't, they changed their formula, I guess, because it's definitely not like, because I used to think that I never used gouache because they were always so like white. So they don't use whitening agent to make it opaque. They just use more of the pigment that they're using in the actual wash or in their formula. I'm not like a product rep for them. I'm just an artist who loves their products. I don't know all the technical end of those things. So there, for that, you'd basically call them up, and they would love to answer your questions. I know that for certain they don't mind answering your questions. Go to their website, Holbein. You can find that you can get their telephone number there and just give them a call. You can definitely, they love to talk to their customers.
Holbein has beautiful, beautiful paints. Both like their gouache is gorgeous, as we're witnessing Peter use right now, or I mean David, sorry.
That's okay.
And then also their watercolors are gorgeous. If you're ever in the store, just ask one of the staff to see the swatch sample, and all the pigments are grind up really, really fine and consistent and incredibly bright.
And this paper that Legion makes, the black, really, I mean, you're not going to get anywhere else. There's no black quality premium black paper out there. It's just amazing paper. I've been with them since they invented this paper, and I've been using it, and I'm liking it more and more each time I use it, because it's so different. It's something a little bit different. It's not like the old, what I'm gonna say, the Elvis Presley on black velvet. It's not that kind of thing. Yeah, though you can make it that if you want to do Elvis. But it's a neat paper, and like anything else, you get better and better with it the more you use it. And I'm just having so much fun with it lately. So I'm gonna leave this aside now. I'm gonna go back to the other one, and I'm just gonna let parts dry, and then I can go back in here. And let's just make one more thing, just the people. I'm just gonna make the people a little bit in here, make them light on top of. I put a couple of people in there walking. Not sure what they're doing walking in the alley at night, but we're just gonna put them in there. Let's get a nice smaller brush. When definitely use the brush that's best fit for the purpose. Now, if you need a brush that's smaller because you're doing smaller things, definitely use that. So we're gonna put them in here, light against dark. These are little like carrot stick people that we do in watercolor. It's also the same as in gouache. I mean, gouache is basically watercolor opaque, so it's all really the same in the long run. It's just that nice that you can use it thick. I love the fact that I can use it thick, and actually that's what I'm doing. Like I said before, I do that now with my regular watercolors. I use it thick. And Holbein, since they don't use ox skull in their watercolors, you can almost use it like gouache, nice and thick. But it doesn't dry to a hard clump. They don't dry to a hard clump. Now you notice I didn't use the yellows like in the photograph, only because I didn't want it all to be yellow. Yellow is a hard color to use. I want to make it more warm tones in there. Let me just put this aside and we'll get back to this, and we'll get our white one going again because it's all dry. And just while I have you here in between these, here are some of the, you may have seen this one in the ads for Legion. They use this in their ad, and this is one I had done. This was actually watercolor and not gouache. This one was gouache. It's kind of like what we're doing now. And so you can see I'm going to be spraying. So that's kind of thing what we're going to be using later. And negative painting comes also in that black paper because I didn't paint the black. I just went around it. Here's one I did of just, again, this is actually acrylics. So this one, we have 3 different ones. This one's acrylic, the last one was gouache, and the one before that was watercolor. And again, this is a different version of that one. And here's one that was just a scene about I did for a Zoom meeting, and I think it was about 15-minute painting. So those are just ones to get the idea of how you can use the black paper. All right, so now with this, let me just show you really quickly how you can wipe stuff out too, because I did a little problem right here. Remember, it was wet, and so it went in there. So just wipe that out. I'm just going to take and gouache. You can wipe out just like you can watercolor. People think that you can't wipe out. It also depends on the paper. This paper of Stonehenge white is wonderful for wiping. If you want to wipe stuff out, it doesn't absorb as much as like an Arches does because it just stays on top a little bit more. And actually, I like that fact because I can rub out then. I'm just going to rub that out real quickly. And I can go over that again with the yellow and white. If I do want to wet it and get rid of that, I can spray it, put it down like this, and use white and yellow and cover it. That's a little bit too much yellow. Get a little bit of white in there. And then wet it, and then just let it float into the rest of the painting. And nobody will ever know that it bled in there. See how easy it is to do that? And you can do that with watercolor too, by the way. It's just as much easy to do in watercolor. So now I'm going in for my darks, right? I have to go get my big darks. Put my picture back up there so I know what I'm doing. And so here we're going to go and just start. I'm going to start from the back and just work my way forward. You get the background done. Let's get the things in the background done. Again, any questions? Please feel free to ask. We love questions.
There's a question about have you ever mounted your pictures onto cradle panels to avoid framing under glass?
I just did a newsletter this week. I do a newsletter every Tuesday that goes out, and I do a paint along every Thursday night. Last night I do a paint along that's free for you to watch. And also the newsletter contains what we're going to be painting on Thursday night. But the last 2 newsletters were about waxing your watercolors and also mounting them on boards with PVA glue and rolling them. So I have two actually right now in my right now on my YouTube channel. That was one of the ones I just filmed, was how I mounted watercolor paper at Stonehenge, by the way, Stonehenge white. I mounted it on two different things, a light board, a light hardboard, an 1/8" hardboard, and also a PVC board that I found at Walmart, not Walmart, at Menards and Home Depot. You can get, it was a ceiling panel actually. I have it right here. This is a panel that was a PVC panel, and this is a little bit thicker and heavier, but I mounted it with PVC. So yes, I do recommend waxing your watercolors and your gouache paintings, so you don't have to use a glass in front of it, because you know how that is. Your price goes down in value when you put glass on it. And a lot of galleries, I'm not sure in Canada if they do that, but here in the United States, they a lot of galleries don't like things behind glass.
And what type of wax do you use on top?
Dorlin makes a wax for oil painters, and
Yep.
And so that wax I use. And there's also a wax, cold wax, that's for furniture, that comes from England. Annie Sloan makes a wax, a furniture wax that makes their paint hard. And I've tried that too. So if you can't get Dorlins, but it sounds like you guys have Dorlins, so Dorlins is great. It's a great little wax, and you just use that wax right over your paint, right over your painting, watercolor. I don't use it over like color pencil. I tried that. It doesn't do a good job because it smears it. But on watercolors and gouache, it doesn't smear anything.
Good to know. Thank you. And just out of curiosity, can the Holbein gouache, can it be varnished?
Yeah. Yep. You can just spray right over it.
Okay, good.
But I wouldn't use the varnish, because varnish yellows in time, where the wax does not yellow. So I would highly recommend that you use wax instead of the varnish. I know some people varnish first and then use the wax over it, but again, the varnish will yellow. It's an acrylic base, and it will, unless maybe you don't use it, but I think all varnishes yellow after time, where the beeswax doesn't yellow. So I'm told, but I think I can see, that being true.
Okay, and do you wax your images before gluing to the panel or afterwards?
That's a good question, because you can do both, but I suggest that you do it first before you paint. And then also you get standard sizes. The nice thing is that you can just find standard size frames. So take your paper and glue it to boards that are standard sizes, and then you'll have to paint those sizes. And that way you're not doing custom framing on yourself. That's always really tough, doing custom framing. It's going to be so expensive. So take the Dorlin, wax it, or do it after you already have the thing glued down, and paint after you have it glued down, I would suggest. I think it's a much better, easier way of working, because a lot of times what you do is you'll do the painting, you'll wax it, and then you realize that you didn't do a certain size, and then you're going to get custom framed. So I always just suggest to my students, do it first, glue it down first. That way there's no problem. You're never going to have a problem, because that's where you're going to be painting on, and that's your dimensions right there. And then little by little, I'm just getting my darks in here. I'm going to put a little warmth underneath the eaves. I think that's always a good way of going, putting in the eaves, putting a little orange from the bottom here. And this is not as dark as I come forward. As I come forward, I get darker and darker. Keeping that kind of like a little bit low key back here. I don't want too much detail back here, but enough to show that there's gonna be some people back there. And I'm trying to get the big again. I always work for the biggest darks I could possibly do first. And this being one thing about, because they also make the gouache in acrylic, but anytime you're using acrylic, it does dry. So when you're going to back to your, when you go back to your palette, a lot of times it's dry your thing, but here it's nice because I can still use everything up that I had mixed beforehand. So it's nice. That's one nice thing about using the watercolor gouache instead of the acrylic gouache. Acrylic gouache is pretty cool though. If you're basically an acrylic painter, you want to try some paints that are creamy. Try the creamy gouache, acrylic creamy gouache that Holbein makes. Super great. A lot of people like that I know that are acrylic painters. They love the acrylic gouache, and the colors are out of this world. Some of the colors are just crazy cool. A little bit. Now I'm gonna put a little bit of the color of the sky through here, and that's a little bit opaque because I wanted to go over that. So there's times when you can do that. You can go over an area and make it opaque then. And then thing is, it's not going to blend itself because you have to blend it then if it's not in water. And now here, just gonna put a little swipe in there. My big brush. How much time do we have? Just half an hour. Okay. Better hurry up a little bit. Go ahead and get everything done. Now I'm going to go in here really quickly and get some of this detail in there. So the people are just basically dark, and I have this dark, it's called dark blue. And they have black, and I could use black, but I just found this is in one of the, I think that in the summer packet. I'm just going to go in here and just really quickly put a wash of this color down. And then while it's wet, while it's wet, throw other colors in there, because then they'll float in that surface. And so I can pick up any color and float it in there. And that's the thing I love about watercolor technique, is that you can use it with gouache, and you can use it nice and thick. I'm just going in here with a nice thick paint. But once it's wet, then you can float other colors in there. And they all work together so well. Were you starting to ask a question? I thought I heard somebody ask a question.
I'll have to just take a little peek here for you, David.
So now I'm getting a little bit thicker. When I'm doing details, I get thicker. I use it thick, but then I can sometimes, if I want other colors in there, I still wet it a little bit so that I can float other colors in there. It's so best to float your pigments, and they get soft edge then. So not all of it is like really thick where you just put it on so thick that you don't get the soft edge by itself. I put it on thick, but then I put water in this so that it will blend itself, because water is what blends it really nicely. And the paint will still work great, and it'll still be thick, but then you can just have it blend itself. I'm a very lazy artist, as you can see. I don't want to do much blending. I wanted to blend itself. And that's the watercolor technique in me. So here, I'm just going to put a little bit of that. Also a red Dorbeck here, probably not as dark. Go through down here. Going a little bit faster, not talking as much because I'm just concentrating and trying to get it done really quick. But definitely ask questions. I may be quiet here for a second, but
Yeah,
go ahead
there's a
and ask
little
questions.
comment here that says Faith's too intrigued to ask questions. It's lovely to watch you paint. You truly have this free way of moving across the paper.
Know your big lights and darks, basically, is how I learned how to do this, is know your big light and dark pattern. Every painting that's good has a really good pattern of lights and darks, or colors even, and get to know those. And usually you have to do that, even if you do that in a sketch beforehand, or look at your painting and turn it black and white, or your photo, I mean, turn your black and white photo to black and white, your color photo to black and white, and look at the values, look at the pattern. if it has a pattern, if it has a nice composition, it'll show in the pattern if it has a good light and dark value pattern. And so then like I do it, every painting I do is basically the same, light to dark, except on black paper, of course, and we're doing it opposite that. But still, it's the big areas that come first, and then little by little you get on the white paper, you get the darks, and then the detailed darks. You can watch me every Thursday, like I said, on YouTube. You can watch me every Thursday. We do a paint along, and I also have a Facebook group where people post then, and we it's a free class basically, is what it is, and you can post your work, and if you need some critique on it, we critique it. Not me sometimes the other students that are in there, and my
Now people can find all this information, say about your paint alongs and your write-ups about mounting your paper versus framing. Can this all be found on your website? Will all the information there?
So
Yes.
BeckerArt.net, or my name, David R. Becker. Don't forget the R. DavidRBecker.com. And look there, and like go to my Facebook page from my website, go to my YouTube channel from my website. You can also sign up for my newsletter that comes out every Tuesday. Every Tuesday, the newsletter comes out with those little things in there. And actually, if you go to my website, there's also archived. Everything's archived, so you can go to the archive of my newsletter, and you can pick up all the old. I mean, I have I think over 300 newsletters right now. I think it's even more than that. Forget how many I have, but I have quite a few out there right now.
You're a busy guy. Do you ever go and work plein air?
Once a year, I go up to Grand Marais, Minnesota, and they have a plein air fest up there, and I've been going there the last 2 years. So yes, I do a lot of plein air painting too. Sometimes I'm actually in a week I'm going up to Dillman's, which is a workshop area. This Sunday I'm leaving for a workshop at Dillman's, and then after that I go to another workshop not too far from there. And then I'm going for Father's Day in a couple of days, I'm going to go plein air painting up in Minnesota. So I definitely love the plein air paint. And gouache is a great medium to take, and even watercolor too. And you don't have to make it look like a watercolor. If you're using gouache, you can do it on panels. You can gesso a panel, and you can work on that, and it has the same kind of feel like an oil painting. So if you feel like all the oil painters are getting all the attention, make your work look like oil painting. Use gouache, and you can still do it like I'm doing now, where you do it loosely at first, and then you build up to the dark and heavier body stuff, which I'm actually what I'm doing. I'm getting this parts in, and then I get thicker and thicker as I go along. I'm jumping around the painting now, getting details in there. Getting windows in, little lines in there. And again, don't be afraid to use black in your work. That's kind of the trend right now. There's a lot of famous artists who use a lot of dark colors. Black is one of, neutral tint. So don't be afraid of the black, of the dark. Don't be afraid of dark, I guess. And back here, I'm just going to make this all a little darker back there. And by making it dark and grayer, and by using blacks and making things grayer, it brings out the colors in things. So then stuff that has more color will look more colorful when you're using black and grays and such in your paintings. The nice thing with gouache is that you can get thick. And so if you feel like you went over something too many times, or it doesn't look fresh, that's okay. Just put a big gob of paint on there, that'd be fine. When you're a beginner, rules are good, but when you get to be a little bit more professional, start breaking those rules and start making the paintings your own. Make it a style that's something nobody's ever done before. And that's always the best thing to get you known as somebody that doesn't paint like somebody else. You paint like yourself, right? So you want to definitely do yourself a favor and paint whatever you want and have fun doing it. I just did last night we did the Thursday night paint along, and it was of a scene that was, I don't have it here right at the moment, but it was a scene of a beach, and we all wanted to be there with big rocks. And if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see what we painted last night. Okay, this is getting pretty close, and then we're going to go in here and take our big brush now and get the big darks in there. So some of them I didn't make it dark enough, so I'm going to go right over it. So the nice thing is you can go right over things. You don't have to worry about it. Go in here and get things a little bit darker. Warmth and cool, kind of a gray. In here. Now this is not so watercolor like. Now I'm getting more into the more of the heavy bodied thicker gouache technique where you're using it thick and just kind of going over there, because I don't really need a soft edge. I just need it to be darker, and I can put nice and thick black blue and it's going to make it kind of a brown. I'm going to go in here, take some thick paint and show some, maybe the street looks like it's wet by just going down into the water here. I like to make my streets look wet by just wetting them a little bit and just going like that. Now this seems to have to be a little bit darker. So you just put a wash over everything. You know, just go put a wash right over it. This is my darks now. Keeping the light centered here, because this is where my center of interest is, this whole grouping right here. And this stuff back here got a little bit too carried away here with the dark. And so I'm going to lighten that up a little bit by pulling it out. Now I'll make this a little bit darker on this side. And again, maybe make it a little bit warmer. Goes over the tape a little bit. And the street itself back there is really dark right here. It goes right into the people. Brings out the menu board right there. And then we'll take our little things and put a little detail, and then we'll have about half an hour to finish the black one. So now I take out my rigger brush. My rigger brush, and we'll just go in here and get this little details. There's a part of the lamp. Anything that's like a little bit more detailed in the center of interest. Let some of this dry here. And then after this is dry, because I can't do this right now because it's all still a little wet, I will take thick amounts of pigment and I'll make it thick, and I'll hit the lights, the tops of their shoulders and the top of their head, just to give it that look of really bright, sparkling light on that area. And that you can do with gouache, because you can make it nice and thick. And so if you're actually using gouache on top of your watercolors, that's the thing to do too. Some people like to do that, but they take gouache on top of their watercolors and make it thick. So start your watercolors a watercolor, and then later on, make it a little bit of a gouache in there too. You can mix these things. You don't have to be so like, oh, I'm only doing watercolor, and you don't have to call it a mixed media. You just call it a water media or watercolor. It just happens to have dark, but watch out for some of those shows that you can't submit to that have only white, that don't allow white. So just watch out for that. And now the sky being that light, and this, I want to make sure that that's got a little bit of yellow white in there, the rooftops of the umbrellas here. I don't want them pure white. I want them to be like the color of the sky. I want the lightest light to be these lights, and I will be putting in, I'm going to show you my airbrush in a little bit. I'll be putting in little specks of light in those little spots. And also, I have some stencils here. A lot of times I use stencils in my work, and so I just take a brush like this and stencil in different shapes. If you got a certain stencil like, I'll show you that in a little bit too. We'll go to the black one again, and we'll get this one done, and then we'll show you the airbrush. We have what, too much time, but this one's not gonna take much longer. I'm just gonna go in there with the lights now and just switch my light over here. Hold on. So basically I'm gonna go in here with a small brush and just work the lights, work the really light areas. And just go in and look for where there's lines of light, and basically it's just all little details of light. A lot of this I'll be faking in. Something I did a lot of when you're doing storyboarding for TV commercials, because you're making everything up. So a lot of times you make stuff up and light things up. And here's a puddle of water. You can put that in the puddle of water, smear it with your fingers. Good thing I have the gloves on. Let's get things smeared in there, tops of things. The wires now can be put in that are running here. See how it just lights up now? You get those little speckles and little shiny things. And all right, somebody's got to have a question, right? Come on, give me a question. See if you can trump me or stump me. Stump me and see if you can ask me a question I can't answer.
It's a challenge, everyone. I'm just impressed that you're managing to paint 2 paintings in an hour and a half. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone else do this.
I do that a lot, and it kind of definitely impresses people, but it's only because I worked as an illustrator. It really is, because I can engage my time exactly. I'm going to finish it exactly at the time. I always do it every Thursday when I do a painting. I always stop at 1 hour. It takes me 1 hour to do it, and so every week we do it. And so I'm getting pretty good at doing. But that's just one painting we do. But I'm getting pretty good at doing fast.
And did you go to art school?
I went to the American Academy of Art in Chicago. It's a art school. It was a 2-year college. I went 4, and I wanted to teach after I got out, and I did want to teach right then and there. But my mentor and instructor, Irving Shapiro, said I should get a real art job, and so I got a real art job. But while I was at the real art job, I was substituting for him. He was a watercolorist, and it was so much fun learning from him, and then being a mentor. He was also the president of the school, and so I went 4 years, and it was only a 2-year college. I didn't want to ever leave, but I did finally leave, and I started teaching right out of school, and so I do definitely love teaching. And I love doing the Thursday night ones, and it's just fun to do them. So here's a little bit of
Thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, so there's a question here. How do you correct a brush stroke that you want to remove?
On the black or the white? Well, you just basically rub it off. What you do is you rub out, let's say we want to take an area that we don't like, you wet it, and you actually, if you're a watercolorist or even an acrylic painter or a gouache painter, one of these spray bottles now, these misters, you take an area, let's say I didn't want this as white or something, I want to take that away from there. So what I'll do is I'll spray it real lightly. I'll wet it, or you can also wet it with your brush if you can do it. But the thing is, you don't want to wet the area if it's really clean. And so what I do is I just rub over it. I loosen up the paint that's on top here. I loosen it up, and now it's all wet, right? And so I can get a soft edge. If I want to take this out, I just completely take it out, and I'm going to go back to black or darker. And then while it's wet, you can also then put more pigment into that. Let's say I want to cover that up. I'll just cover it up with the gouache again, and I'll get a soft edge because I have it wet again. So you can always go back in, and you can always re-wet it, and you can always go back in and work things out, watercolor or gouache. Now acrylic it dries, so with that you just go over it with a thicker amount of paint. But so I do all this.
And there's been a couple questions about this water mister that you have. Where did you get it?
It's
You remember?
like, lot of the companies that like pledge and those that it start making stuff. It's actually hair designers use it for spraying hair, I guess is what I hear that they use it for. And I just went on Amazon and you put in mister bottle, a water mister. It's a water mister sprayer. So
there you have it, everyone. And there's also a question here asking if you'd be willing to speak more about illustrating professionally and how one can break into the professional areas of art. Do you have any advice you'd like to share?
Yeah, the one thing about illustrating, like I had done, they really don't teach that at school so much because it's basically you being able to draw from your imagination. And it's one of the things I'm actually right now, I'm writing a book, or it's a sketchbook that's going to teach you how to work a little bit more from your brain instead of working from just a photograph all the time and working from an object that is in front of you. Like I took 4 years of life drawing. And when I got out, I couldn't draw. I was a great copy machine. Boy, I can copy anything I saw that was in front of me. But if I had to do it without something in front of me, I couldn't do it. And my job then became that I had to draw anything that was not in front of me. So the art director would come to me and just say, hey, draw me a guy drinking a Miller Coors, Miller beer. And then he's doing this and this and this. And I had to draw it. And I couldn't. I was like, man, I took 4 years of life drawing every day for 4 years. And I didn't know how to draw. I knew how to copy something, but I didn't know how to draw from your imagination. So I learned how to do that by just drawing and looking at things and not drawing while you're looking at it. Study it and try to bring it into your head. And then afterwards, then you take and you draw it, not by looking at it, just take it from your head, your image from your head. And so that's basically what I did. I just did it for a lot of times. And you just start learning how to draw. And so I'm going to come out with a sketchbook that's going to teach you how to do that. It's basically an assignment book, and it's going to take you 66 days to learn how to do that. And it gives you into the habit of sketching from your brain. And basically the book is going to have pictures in it that you have to look at, but then you sketch it without looking at those pictures.
Well, David, make sure you let us know at Opus when that book comes out.
And actually, Legion Papers is actually going to be the one that publishes it. So,
oh, good. So we'll know
in time. And so to get a job as an illustrator, you got to be able to work and draw from your imagination, basically. And so basically, it doesn't matter what kind of degree you have; it's what kind of portfolio you have. If you can draw from your head and you can do a lot of great drawing, it doesn't matter if you have a PhD and whatever. If you can't draw, you can't draw. And so it's basically your portfolio, and that you can draw from anything. So now we're going to use the airbrush. And so this airbrush is, again, this is also cosmetic airbrush. It's for cosmetic. You can use any other kind of airbrush that, that has a little bit of compressor. This happens to be one. And I actually was at NAMTA, at the NAMTA show, and I was showing this to the airbrush companies saying, why don't you get one of these for us artists that is like a little bit more professional? Because this thing is kind of broken down a couple of times on me and stuff. And so hopefully it'll work. But what I do is I take water, put it in my white, and I just kind of mix a batch with water and white, and I just kind of drip it in there with my brush. You can also use like ink, acrylic ink, or watercolor that comes in as water, a little bit more watery. But I just kind of mixing the gouache with my water, making it real thin, and then just scooping it into my, make sure you clean it, because that's a problem I think I was having too. This is kind of a cheap airbrush, and again, I got it off. It's no brand name. It's just off of Amazon, and it's for fashion, or what do you call it? Makeup artists. They put makeup on, I guess. So I press a little white button here. I'm gonna press this little white button. Hopefully it'll work. So you hear it. And so that's the compressor. And now I'm gonna test it on a sheet of paper, other than my painting. Well, let's go right here. Well, let's go right on there. So I pull the trigger, and it's gonna come out white. And so I'm gonna go right over these. Yeah, I just put a little bit of white on there, and I can make these little dots, light it up the areas. And so I know a lot of people think this may be cheating for watercolor, but hey, the people that do these really fine things, they all use airbrushes. So don't, just because you heard things and or you think things, don't, these people that are getting these really high definition or very, very detailed paintings, they use airbrushes and they also use stencils. And so there's no cheating in art. It's whatever you get at the end. But that's important. I'm going to write down here and put a little bit of that. I'm just basically pulling back my trigger. And it's going to go in here and soften some edges. Put a little light on the subject here. Let's go wet that area right there. But see how it just lit up the lights? It just kind of lights up the area. And so this is water right here. So I'm just going to put that coming right down here. I'm just going to put a little light in there. It looks like it's lit up in the water here. All right, so that's that one. Now let's go to our other one. And like I said, on this one too, you can also use an airbrush to get your lights. And let's say I want to put a little light right here. Just spat a little light right there. Maybe you want to keep a little area of light. And again, this is gouache, so it's supposed to be opaque. And so get opaque with it. That's okay. Make it thick. Here, right in the light, I'm just going to put some lights. And people were constantly asking me, you know, because they really don't, the big art airbrush companies, they don't have something like this yet. So, and I told Iwata and a couple of other ones that were at NEMTA show, I said, you know, please make one, make one. I mean, we were using these things and it's great for plein air when you want. I did a nocturnal scene and I use this also to get some of the lights in there. Works out great. But I think we're almost done here, guys. Let me shut this off. Any more questions?
Just if you have time for a stencil.
Oh yeah. I mean,
You get a few
thank you for
thumbs up
reminding me.
from some of the participants.
Also, real quickly, I want to show you. Here's one. This is the black paper, the Stonehenge Aqua cold press black heavy, and you can also use the black paper for color pencil. These were color pencils I did with color pencil, and you can put gouache over the color pencil too, or gouache first and then color pencil over it. And so I did that one and this one. These are all color pencil, and this one you may have seen in an ad. I think they use this one in an ad, or the other one, the boat one they used in an ad. So these are all color pencil on black paper, on the 300-pound hot press and cold press. Excuse me, by the way. So for the stencils, you can take things out. Let's say you take a stencil like this, or I have many different stencils that I have that are all different shapes and sizes. These are stencils that you can get from hopefully Opus. I'm not sure if you guys can sell stencils, or there's a couple companies out there on the web that sell stencils. Just type in art stencils. And this one's even got writing on it. Just go in here and grab this one. So this is kind of writing. And so let's say we wanted to put writing in here, which we don't want to do that, but if we want to put writing or some kind of stencil in there, you can either spray it on or you can rub it out. And so let me just show you how to spray on. So you just, let's say you want to spray it on, just take your paper and then you just basically spray right over it. You can also, if you have one of those spray, I think it's too thick now. It's getting too thick, my air in there. You can do that. You can go over it. I think that so you can get a little bit of the lettering by spraying it. You can also dab with a brush. Now you can't do it wet because it'll go underneath the stencil. So you have to make a pretty dry brush when you do the stencils. Another great thing though is you can take out. That's even more fun, taking out. And what you do is you go over your paint and you take a magic eraser, one of these that you use with watercolor, and you can just go right over this and rub out. But now this has to be just damp. You can't make it really, really thick or really, really wet. Let me see, maybe we can just put a little lettering on the street in here. So you're gonna take this, let me just put this over here. And there's so many different stencils. It's very natural stencils too. So let's say I want to go back to black and I want to stencil this. What I do, if you had let's say you had a brick stencil like this bricks I made, you could have a brick stencil. And if you want to go back to black, I just rub. I put this on my towel. I always work on a towel, and I just go right over it. And even though this is gouache, you can still rub it off. I'm just rubbing it off, and now you're gonna see I have a little bit of the lettering in there, and actually it got really wet. Oh, it's still wet, that's why. I put it over something that was still wet. Okay, that didn't work yet. You get the idea. You put it over it and you rub it out with a magic eraser with a damp, not even damp, just barely wet. And just you can rub out, go back to the white paper or the black paper. Like here, I could do it too. You're gonna set this, that's dry. So you take it and you rub it out back to white. And then you get the lettering in there. But again, I didn't do good enough, but you can basically take out and get back to the white of the paper. Let's see the side of the wall or something. Like when you're doing, and the thing is, when you're using a stencil, you have to watch out. Is it part of the painting or is it more of a graphic design into the painting? If it's more of a graphic design of the painting, then you don't want to use one that's graphic design and one that's part of the painting. So this would be like if you're doing a flower scene or something, you need it in the background behind a flower, just maybe so like it's branches and part of the scene. And then, or the words would be more of a design and element of that. And so that's it. Any other questions?
That's great. Just about the magic eraser, is that like your typical Mr. Clean magic eraser?
Mr. Clean magic eraser.
And do you ever, are you ever worried about the archival concerns with it?
I don't use the Mr. Clean one. You can buy this foam is called there's a certain name for this foam, and it doesn't come with anything in it. So it's like there's no chemicals or anything in it like that, and you're rubbing it out anyway. So, and I don't really make it wet, so it's basically like a sponge. You can actually even use a sponge, but I'm not using the magic erasers that by Mr. Clean, because I think they have some kind of chemical in it, but I'm not using those. I'm using one that there's a certain name for this kind of sponge. Go to Amazon and type in like magic eraser or a sponge. And it kind of, I wish I would know the name of them right now. I totally forget about what the name is of them.
That's okay. And your colored pencils, what brand do you like to use when you're working?
Usually I like to work with General Pencil. General Pencil makes like the best pencils. I mean, they make all kinds of pencils. So I'm sure you guys carry General Pencil too.
Yeah, we sure do.
And so General Pencil has a lot of like for the white pastel pencil for the paper, and also if you're for your brushes, they make that cleaner, that brush cleaner, the magic that General Pencil makes. It's really nice. So here's this one.
All right, the final reveal.
The final reveal. Take the tape off. You gotta take the tape off.
Cleans it right up, doesn't it?
Yeah. I always do that too. I kind of tape them down so that you have a little edge to you. And a lot of people use like their own little mat board that they put on there, like just to see what it looks like. I just take the tape off and I have a little edge of 1/4 inch.
No,
always pull away because some of this paper may be soft. The black paper is pretty soft. You see, so what I do is I pull away. Always don't pull up, don't pull in, pull away, because you don't want to rip the paper into the painting. So if you go like this, rip away, that's fine. So there's the other one.
All right. And what kind of tape do you use when you tape your edges?
Best tape out there, and you can use it for cutting stencils also and masking things, is soft tape. Holbein has a soft tape. It's called Holbein soft tape, and it looks like masking tape, but it's kind of plasticky, if that's a word. And it's very thin. You can kind of see through it, and it repels the water really well. And it's not as tacky as some of the tapes are, so sticky that it rips stuff. So it comes in like a small little thing like this. Ask Holbein if it's basically Holbein soft tape, and it's really thin. Again, you can see it's like a really thin tape. I've used most of this up already. It comes a little bit thicker, comes wider, but it's really thin. It's a really thin, and it's more plasticky than masking tape. And so and like I said, when you put it down, see, you can see through it. You can see through it. It's that thin. Sorry about that.
That must be our time up ringer.
There you go.
Well, that was amazing. We're so happy you took a little bit of time to be here with us, David. Everyone, David Becker. Give a little
so much.
clap.
And if you have any more questions, and you still want to ask me something, go to my website. You can email me at my website. Again, my website, BeckerArt.net, or my name, davidartbecker.com. And you can still ask me questions. And I think Pamela's going to send me a video of this, and I'll put it on my YouTube channel, and you can watch it again.
Yeah, sounds good. So thanks everyone for participating. Thanks for all your questions in the chat and just being your wonderful selves and coming and joining us today. I hope to see you all again another time in the virtual reality here. And I hope you just have the most wonderful day. So until next time.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much for inviting me. Bye-bye.